Thank you for being here. Please take your seats. I want to welcome everyone to First Wednesdays in the age of Kindle. Who needs libraries? Be sure to sign up for our door prize with one of these little yellow sheets. Put your name on it, and there's a bowl being passed around. The door prize is, of course, an ACLU bag with a signed copy of our panelist John Eller's book, Becoming Ray Bradbury. So we're very excited about that. And now I have something very special to share with you because Serendipity is with us today. We also are announcing our new executive director, Jane Henniger, and I'm going to introduce her to introduce the moderator. So, Jane.
Thanks, Kelly, and thank you all for being here. I'm very excited to be the new executive director. I feel very honored to work at the ACLU of Indiana and help continue its tradition of protecting liberties and our equality before the law. So I'm also very excited that my first week coincides with the first Wednesday, and with this particular first Wednesday, libraries and the facts and knowledge that they contain are also an important protector of our liberty in the United States. And what a better moderator than Dennis. I couldn't imagine a better moderator than Dennis Ryerson to talk about this topic. Dennis represents the best of our country, a journalist who works with integrity and intelligence. And Dennis has demonstrated that in his work across the country as well, we're fortunate to say, as well as in Indianapolis at the Indianapolis Star. Dennis is a great friend and a great asset to our community. And both the work that Dennis has done over his career as well as the topic of today's panel is, I think, in many ways demonstrated in its importance by one of my favorite quotes, or comments, I should say, by Thomas Jefferson, when he posed, probably rhetorically, the choice between having a government without newspapers or having newspapers without government. Thomas Jefferson didn't hesitate to say, I would take newspapers without government. Because if we don't have facts, if we don't have knowledge, our democracy is meaningless. So the work and interests of the panel today, as well as the lifelong wonderful work of Dennis Ryerson, demonstrates that insight of Thomas Jefferson's very well. So I'm honored that you're all here, honored that you all are here, and I'll let Dennis and talk to the panelists that have brought you all here. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jane. That was a most gracious introduction, and of course we journalists know that the truth is beneath the headlines, but we won't go there today. I'm delighted to be here. I was delighted to be asked. It's a great topic. I want to thank the Civil Liberties Union for convening this. It's a great organization, does wonderful things. And certainly WFYI, which has been once again generous with the use of its facilities in service to the community. I'm a member of the Indiana Debate Commission, and they have graciously served as a host for some of our debates. And when we ask, they always provide. So it's great to have resources like the ICLU and WFYI among us. I think the topic today is particularly well-timed with the loss of Gore Vidal yesterday, an American icon and an iconoclast. What a character he was. I wonder what he would have thought about today's topic, something to think about as we go through the conversation. It's a wonderful topic. In the age of Kindle, who needs libraries? I arrived in Indianapolis 9.5 years ago and immediately engaged a debate with people saying, you know, they're building this library down the street, and why do we need to spend money on this library with the internet? And that question's been going around for a long time. We've got a fine panel who will help explore the topic, and then we'll open it up for questions and brief observations from you if you would like. and we'll close in around 50 minutes. And Kelly, you'll give me the sign when we're, that's the sign. Okay, we'll have door prizes. We'll go right to the panel. Reuben Bradford is Collection Development Librarian for the Indianapolis Public Library, and I'm also told she's an attorney, and an interesting job that you've got, Reuben. Reuben, I'm curious, what's the last book that you've read?
The last book that I've read, it was a romance book by Charlotte Stein. I read it on my Kindle last night.
Oh, there you go. A librarian with a Kindle. And speaking of electronic devices, it's probably good if you turn off yours. You know, we don't want to be interrupted. The great cellist Lynn Harrell was performing with the Seattle Symphony several years ago in this $250 million gorgeous concert hall. In the middle of his solo performance, his cell phone went off. So keep that as a reminder. John Eller is the director for the Center for Ray Bradbury Studies. I don't think Ray Bradbury needs an introduction to any of you. And he's an author in his own right. The center's at IUPUI. It's great to have it in our community. John, when in your life did you become so deeply interested in the written word?
Well, probably just as a young kid in elementary school. Starting elementary school overseas in a small private school in Southeast Asia, and then coming back to America and finding that the library was really the heart of the school. The library was physiologically the core of the school, and as it is often the core of any community, of any town. And I found that later in life, by the time I was 10 or 12 reading Ray Bradbury, that was his vision too, and he projected that vision out to all of us over many, many decades.
Very good. Holly Wooden is an account executive with Microsoft. I lived in the Silicon Valley before I came here, the heart of Apple. And Holly knows what I'm going to say. In the Silicon Valley, you mentioned Microsoft, and you might as well have mentioned Darth Vader. And I suspect some people might think that she's the Darth Vader of this conversation coming from the electronic side. But we'll be glad to hear about that. Holly, do you spend much time in libraries?
Absolutely. I think, you know, ever since growing up in the lovely heart of America in the state of Iowa.
We're both from Iowa. At the end of the day, it all gets back to Iowa.
It all comes back to Iowa. And, you know, I was that awkward kid that was in the corner back of the classroom that had gaps between my teeth. I wore glasses from the first grade on and, you know, was picked on. And the library books became my sole survival mechanism. This is where I went to escape. I went to learn about, you know, other families, other kids that had similar problems, that succeeded, that failed, that went through, you know, trials and tribulations and came out ahead. And it's what gave me hope. And, you know, as an adult, I read at least 2 or 3 different books every single week. I just came back from a fantastic vacation, and, you know, my last book was a romance novel that I picked up in the airport. It was, by golly, it was paperback. It was a printed word. But I have an e-reader, and, you know, from the start of my career, I've always been involved in technology, and I really love to help people understand how they can utilize technology, how they can change and adapt and adopt that technology and bring about, you know, new iterations of innovation and betterment in general.
Very good. Welcome. Finally, Jim Lingenfelter is president of the Board of Trustees of the Indianapolis Public Library. Jim's an architect, but got kind of married into libraries, I understand. Jim, tell us about that.
Well, I've been sleeping with a librarian for about 32 years, and legally, in the state of Indiana. But I'm from Indianapolis through a long line of Lingenfelters. They lived on the Circle in 1826, so I can't claim to be anything but a Hoosier. And remember going down to the Central Library and walking into that space when I was young, after I had been to my neighborhood libraries, going into that central space and realizing all the knowledge that was there. And the building is just obviously very beautiful too. Paul Philippe Cray, who created the Folger Library in Washington, won a competition in 1916 and just did us a wonderful favor, I think, by giving us that building. And then the recent addition by Evans Woolen has enhanced that and enhanced the public space. But that's all secondary, I think, to the access that it gives to the world. The library has a tremendous amount of information, everything from traveling to Tasmania to repairing your Pinto. So I really like that.
Very good. Thank you, Jim. A little about myself. I've been a journalist all my adult life and a little bit before. I don't recall my parents reading much to me when I was a kid, but I grew up on Iowa rental farms, and I hated those stinking farms. And I soon learned at a young age that reading took me to another place and introduced a different world to me. And I was very fortunate that my parents didn't object to my reading. And when the Des Moines Register would show up and I'd get home from school, I'd read the Register to avoid going out to do farm chores, and my parents let me do that. And I developed a love for newspapers, but I also developed a love for reading. And they let us read whatever we could get our hands on, including comic books. They seemed to feel like if we were reading, that was a good thing. So they would give us books for Christmas and birthdays, and it was one of the few treasures we had growing up. And I will never forget that. I'm an avid reader still. I'm working my way through. I'm very much enjoying Robert Caro's latest book in his series on Lyndon Johnson, the latest book, The Passage of Power. Just a fascinating study of the development of an incredible politician and the process and all of that. So, and as a journalist, I'm well aware of the impact of the internet on the information stream and what it has done to the industry that I've loved and has given me so many opportunities, and the changes now that are taking place as everybody now is a producer of information, a consumer of information. We've lost a bit of our community truth, which has been replaced by personal truth, because if I see something on the internet and I agree with it, it's automatically the truth. It may not be factually correct, but if I believe it and it looks good and somebody posted it, well, good enough for me. Anyway, we'll get on with the discussion. Question I have for the panel, are libraries really still relevant in an internet age? Who wants to tackle that first?
Yes.
I second that.
I absolutely agree.
Actually, our ebook circulation increased 265% from January through June 2011 to 2012. So even though everybody has a Kindle, they still need the library to get the books.
So they are ordering books through the library for their Kindles. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's an amazing figure. Jim?
They're even more necessary that we don't create a greater divide, an economic divide between those who do have Kindles and those that don't. Not everybody wants a Kindle. And there's, I think, a necessity for libraries to be there to make sure that the information that we have, if it's in print, it's different. It's factual and it can't be changed. If it's on the internet, the information can be changed freely by those who control the information. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do like to have, I like to have books that I can go and refer to. And so I do think that there is, not just from a technology standpoint, but I think from an economic standpoint, there's a need for a library.
Okay.
I think that's going to be the case for a long time to come. People, everyday people come and use the libraries, and that's not going to change for a long time. People looking for jobs, people that don't have a computer infrastructure at home, families looking for children's books, a wider variety than maybe they can afford to buy at the stores. That's a core group that are always going to use libraries.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. I think when you take a look at not just the printed word or the electronic word that the libraries can provide, but all of the different services and offerings, and we were just talking about this before the panel discussion, that the libraries have as well. I think about, I have a son at home that has some learning challenges and some developmental challenges as well, and he goes to the library in order to build his social skill set and interact in some of those groups and sessions and forums that they offer as a part of our public library that he doesn't get from just reading the text. And so I think there are a lot of services that our library provides that are just key.
Reuben, there's been some discussion a lot of people say, well, it's okay. We understand there's a need for a repository of information. And we understand that people want to self-select more than ever before. They don't want to be directed. Why do we need librarians?
There's also so much more information that's out there. You need librarians to help you sort through it, to help you get the information specifically that you need at that time on your subject. Kind of like searching Google and getting 1 million results, which is a lot of results, but how many of those are actually helpful to the purpose that you need at that time?
But doesn't that run counter, similar to my business? When a lot of people don't want an editor standing between them and the news. They want to access the information directly themselves. They want to sort out what's important. They don't want somebody managing it for them. Doesn't the role of a librarian counter that sense of a populist approach to getting information that we're living in now?
Not at all. That information is still available to you, and if you have time to sort through 1 million hits, then that's great. Or 40,000 books that we purchased in print, purchased last year. If you want to go through and read each and every one of those to get the information that you need on deadline or for whatever purpose, it's all available to you, and we won't stand in your way. But some people want to have that narrowed down for them so they can get the best information for their purpose in a timely manner.
Any of the rest of you have thoughts on that? Holly?
I believe that in an age where we are able to access so much data, so much information, and have that surface to us, I think it's more and more critical that librarians take that art, that skill set that they have utilized to catalog the traditional word and evolve that to that next generation and help us understand and categorize the information that we're looking at. As Robin mentioned, help us sift through the true from the untrue and
The truthy.
Exactly. So I think it just becomes taking that skill and moving it to a different form factor. But the skill is still very much required, and even more so because of the accessibility of all of that extra data.
And in many ways, our libraries are not our grandfather's libraries. They provide a whole range of additional sets of services. If you're a small businessman and you can't afford to be a member of the Chamber of Commerce, you can go into the library and someone will help you search through business law and help you get your information that you need. And you may not have time to self-sift. You need to have a professional librarian. And that's something I don't think a lot of people realize, that when you walk up to a librarian, you're talking to somebody that has a professional degree, that has an obligation to their profession to give you the right answer. And I think that's something that is a great value to us as citizens. We don't realize what we're getting in our libraries with that. They can sift through those 1 million hits and give us what's relevant. Not everybody's looking for the broad information. Some people are looking for very narrow information that they can act on immediately. And that's what librarians can provide.
Ray Bradbury felt throughout his life that the librarian profession was one of the great time-honored professions and important professions. And although he came late in life, very late in life, to accept some of the world of the e-book advances, he also applauded any opportunity to extend our opportunities to read, the motivation to read, and the concentration of research that these librarians can provide for us through the interfaces at the library, the modern library today. And I think that was a great satisfaction to him in the 21st century.
So, given the world we're in, where everybody has immediate access to information, given the world we're in where tax cuts are the cause du jour, both candidates for governor have said Hoosiers ought to be paying less taxes, either gasoline sales tax or income taxes. And we're privatizing things as people are beginning to think, well, government can't do everything, can't manage roads, can't manage parking systems, and we are spending too much money on things that other people could do who have an interest in it and can support it, private foundations, things like that. Why use public money for libraries in the internet age?
I think that's a critical question, Dennis. We have to decide what are core services that are required by the citizens from a library. I think access to laws is one of the most important things to have. If we find that the government can change the laws and we don't have it in writing, we don't know how to defend ourselves. And so I think that it's very important that we have access to that. I think it's important that we have access to knowledge to become, to continue to become a more civilized community. So I think we have to decide what are our basic services. And as I said earlier, we are providing a range of services. When we were talking about cutting back hours, the parents that came to the library said, to ask us to make sure that we didn't close their library, said, this is the only safe place my child has to go after school. And so we're providing social services along with loaning books. So we are an integral part of the community. You may cut our funding, but I don't think you'll ever see our funding completely cut off.
As someone who's really outside of the specialization of the library world, I note that even with statistics that tell us that libraries, public sector libraries, are doing fairly well in terms of use, we do have these budget problems, and that came home very, very strongly to Ray Bradbury in his later years. The Waukegan Public Library up in Illinois, where he went almost every Monday night from the age of 6 to 14, is really just a hollow shell today. Ray has spent many years in his longer life in California championing libraries, but he also campaigning for Ventura Library and Long Beach, and I believe those libraries, at least the structures themselves, are either at risk or they're no longer used anymore. And that's one of the big challenges, I think, is the infrastructure costs.
As you look at the trends in our society, fewer people are reading for literacy. And Ray, you're probably as well aware of that as anybody. And the trend is particularly strong among younger groups. There was a fairly short period, I saw some figures, I think it was last week as I was thinking about this presentation, 28% decline in readership of literacy among younger Americans. What do we make of those figures, Ray? Or not Ray, I'm sorry. You wish you were Ray some days, I'm sure. John.
Channeling for Ray, which I do a lot in these recent decades and years. There is the sense that he would often say, and it's paraphrased in some of the writings around Fahrenheit 451, you don't have to burn books to get, all you have to do is get people to stop reading them. And that's really the real problem. The book has to come alive. He would often say, he wrote a piece for the very first National Library Week in 1957. He said the library was the great watering place where the animals, large and small, came from the night to drink and smile at each other across the green, glass-shadowed glades between the book mountains. And that kind of magic is what we may not have anymore, that adventure of going to the library. And I think that's what worried him the most.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
My mom was actually a Head Start teacher, so this is one thing, you know, literacy, early learning, that was one of her big things, and that's one of the things that the library does the best, with summer reading, going out to preschools and daycares and schools, and if for some reason we don't catch them at that age, teen programs and teen reading adventures, and if for some reason we don't catch them at that age, adult literacy. So there's always a time when you can come in and pick up what you may have missed.
Is there a danger that we may have our heads in the sands, though? I mean, you're all readers, and you all appreciate the role of the written word. I remember in the 1970s going to an AP bureau where they showed me this great big machine, which is about as big as this thing, and it was a different form of typewriter where you type your copy into this machine, it would show up on a screen, and you could cut and paste right there. Wonderful, wonderful thing. And I couldn't imagine that being in my newsroom, let alone a world in which that machine now is the size of this, and information is available whenever I want it, whenever I need it. It's changed lives. It's certainly changed my life. Are we willing to step back really and say, hey, you know, this thing's really going to change? And, you know, with so many younger people not reading, with people doing things more than ever before, used to be people had more time to read, but used to be people had more time to read newspapers. People had more time to get involved in civic affairs. People are pulling away from all of that now. Are we being realistic to think that there is a role for libraries as we, again, have come through the democratization of the information process?
Well, Alvin Toffler talked about us reaching a point where physically we could not keep up with the changes that science was bringing to us. And I think that that's one of the roles that the library can play. The library was recently awarded a very significant grant from the Herb Simon Family Foundation to approach early childhood literacy. And it's a different kind of literacy. We have a different kind of literacy that we have to reach out to now. We have, it used to be you'd learn about a calendar and you'd learn the days of the week, and we find that our children that are checking out books don't understand 3 weeks away when they have to return it. They don't know when to return it. So we're having to approach a lot of different kinds of literacy. Again, that's one of those things that it's not just checking out books. It's a social service that we provide at the library. So I think we're part of an institution that is part of what we are as a society.
I think it's interesting that we not only have people directly involved in the library, Robin and Jim, but John and Holly, who come at it from different perspectives, but yet such strong defenders of what libraries can do. Holly, from your perspective, what are the values, what are the additions that libraries can bring to life, to the life of the community that you see them?
I think there's quite a bit. You know, again, in addition to helping us understand the information that's available to us, cataloging it, helping represent, you know, what is a good, credible, reliable source versus not. I think, you know, we've talked about all of those, and, you know, we've talked about a lot of the comprehensive services to the community that libraries provide as well, as it relates to, you know, discussion groups or, you know, helping, as I mentioned before, develop some of those interpersonal skills, et cetera. I think there are a lot more and more technology innovations, disruptive technologies that we have seen in the past, we will continue to see in the future. And I think libraries play a big role in, I think, as you mentioned before, making sure that, you know, we do have the ability to disconnect from all of the noise, from all of the rushing around, and continue the art of, I don't know, the conversation, and the ability to relate and to exchange ideas. And the libraries provide a very nice common central area for doing so. And I think they're a good mechanism to, in the light of, you know, new technologies coming out every day, and certainly being part of an industry that launches our fair share of technologies and innovation into the marketplace. I think they're a grounding force for us. I think they honestly help us maintain our sense of center and self.
And as much as we all love books, all of us love books, libraries haven't been about just books for quite some time. I mean, some of you may have checked out LPs from your library. Some of you may have checked out cassette tapes, videotapes, compact discs. We've gone through the formats. You may have come just last Sunday. They had a Hometown Roots concert in our auditorium. The symphony plays there. Groups present dramas. It's a lot more than just books, and it has been for quite some time.
Not to mention the computer rooms that are just full on any given day in a library where people without computers at home
Right.
can come and access the information stream through the library.
And learning tech literacy is huge at the library. Applying for jobs, find a job where you apply on paper anymore. And you need to know sometimes Excel for your job. The library teaches classes on that. You might need to know Word. The library teaches classes on that. It's not just about reading.
Not just about reading, but reading is at the bottom of what we do.
Yes.
And I'm curious, Holly, Robin, and John. Robin, you said your last book you read was on the Kindle. Holly, you're from the techno world, your own self. John, as a student of books and the printed word, is there an experiential difference in reading material on a Kindle or an iPad as opposed to picking it up in a printed book and surfing through the pages?
Well, Mr. Bradbury, who is very much into the sensate way of looking at books, would say it needs to smell like a book. It needs to smell like it's been a part of your household over time. It needs to have the touch. It needs to reflect light in a particular way. But he also appreciated the fact that the access to knowledge in the library through such devices now extends the four walls of the library, and he would definitely have approved of that. And the reading experience is going to be the same no matter what. In the ideal and in the abstract, you know, we read to broaden our knowledge, to stimulate the imagination, and to discover the unexpected connections between things on our world and on out into the cosmos. And I think libraries are positioned to facilitate that, no matter whether it is that beautiful, musty old book or a shiny flat screen.
And I think that's very fair. And you know, everybody learns and experiences things in a very different way. And I think what's important is that we provide a diverse way for individuals to experience that written word. You know, some people, and in some cases, even I, like I mentioned before, you know, just love opening that brand new book and hearing the spine crack for the first time. You know, but there are other times when that's just not, it's just not feasible. And I love some of the flexibility that the e-readers provide, being able to load up 100 books and take it on the plane with me when I travel around. It's fantastic because I can't afford the fees that the airlines charge when I'm over my weight on my bags. So I think that the flexibility around, you know, not only how you access the written word, but then also the ability to traverse back and forth between paper versus the e-reader based on how you like to learn, based on how you enjoy it. And I think that's what's important is the underpinning, you know, premise of having people read. Right? And I love the fact that technology provides us with a variety of mechanisms with which to do that.
And when you're on the plane and everyone has to shut off their devices,
that's painful.
you still have the print. You're the only one that still gets to read until you've reached your cruising altitude.
A very good point. You've alluded to the democratic effect of libraries and providing an option for all. Jim, I believe you said that the whole issue of access to information and the concern about the gap in who has information and who doesn't have information. Talk to us more about that particular role in a democracy and the importance of everybody having information, and why is it that libraries are so essential to that?
Well, we have two aspects to that, Dennis. One is the physical availability of material and opening the doors and allowing everybody to come through the door. You don't have to have ID. You don't have to show ID at the door just to come into the building and use the materials. You have to maintain a certain modicum of respectability, and you can't smell too bad, or we have people that help people find a place to get clothes and a shower. But it's that democracy of being open to everybody. But then beyond that, we try to buy as much information as possible across the greatest spectrum possible to provide the community with what they see as the community values. And that has to reach everybody. It can't be just your values or my values or Roberta's values. It has to be everybody's, because we have to have a broad spectrum of information. Sometimes that leads us into things that may be objectionable to some, and other things may be objectionable to others. But we have to maintain that we have to use the democracy to protect the minority from the tyranny of the majority, if you will. And that's where the library is the great equalizer. But I think in the love fest of librarians, we have to also be aware that librarians are gatekeepers as well. Nicholson Baker wrote a book called Double Fold, and it's about the digitalization. And he has been spending all the money that he gets trying to buy up collections of newspapers. He calls librarians the barbarians because they are advocating for destroying materials to microfilm them, debinding books to enter them into the electronic world. And he just really, he decries this loss of the physical aspect. And he says that we're going through an artificial process that we're destroying these things to make them, quote unquote, more available. And I agree with that to some degree, that we need to have the physical evidence of things that they existed at some point. But it's got to be available to everyone. I think there's one subscription library left in San Francisco, the Working Men's Library. That was an original idea. Libraries only go back to about 1850, public libraries, public lending libraries. Franklin established a lending library in Boston, or Philadelphia, I'm sorry, and Jefferson sold his collection of books to pay his debts to the Library of Congress. But it wasn't until about 1850 where we had real public lending libraries. It started in Britain, came to the United States. And we have a variety of different types of libraries, but I think the basic library that we need to have as a society is the open, democratic public library.
That would strike a chord with Mr. Bradbury as well. The essential nature of libraries to the public forum are so important down through time. That is where traditionally the successful democracy depends on an enlightened electorate, and that education all came through library, especially in a case like Bradbury, where he really felt that that's where he would be learning. It broke his heart when Hitler burned books in Germany in 1935. But he said the far greater evil was done silently when Stalin, and then during the Cultural Revolution in China, burned books and murdered far more widely at that time, silently, quietly, behind the scenes.
We'll get to the audience in just a bit. Just one more area, and I always love those stories where you have information that you didn't know. And Reuben, you were talking about the number of people who are actually using the library to access e-books. They can't afford to download them on their own, so they get them from the library. In terms of circulation of materials, if you include the electronic materials and everything else, what is the total trend? Does it mean that total usage and total information is increasing coming out of the library today?
I'm not sure. I think so. I think more people are reading overall. More people are using materials overall. We haven't really seen the drop-off of everybody moving to one format or another. It's just more. Mm-hmm. It's more people reading, more people listening, more people, because we do have downloadable audiobooks as well. So just more.
Yeah.
The library circulated about 14 million items last year for a population of under 1 million. So that means that each one of you borrowed 14 items last year. Wow.
And thank you.
But our ebook is increasing because we are buying more ebooks. So it's a catch-22. We are doing something called a Tinker Station that you can go to your library and the Tinker Station will be set up and they can help you with your Christmas present on learning how to download. We follow trends. We follow the trends, but we cannot be pop culture.
Okay.
And I think that's an important point. I think it's about understanding, certainly I think the severe, extremist position of burning the physical paper, never would be one to support that. But I do think it's important, and I think I've seen that with our Indianapolis libraries and surrounding community libraries, taking a look at the disruptive technologies that are landing and understanding how they need to change, what business models and underpinning ecosystem needs to change around it in order to continue to be an effective force within the community and continue to exist. So.
Okay. Kelly, we've got a microphone someplace for the audience. Okay, we've got an official holder of the microphone, and I'm going to ask you to use the microphone and hold it fairly close because this is being recorded. So I want to get your questions for the panel and/or very brief observations. I know everybody'd like to make a speech, but if everybody made a speech, we'd be here till 10 o'clock at night, which may not be a bad thing, but we want to respect your time and the time of the panelists. So. We have a question in the front row.
Okay, I will make sure, yeah, it's working now, okay. Yeah, be sure you talk in the microphone. Just raise your hand, I'll bring the microphone to you.
Thank you all for being here. I am here kind of as an advocate for a group that has not been mentioned within this whole technology discussion, the seniors. Robin said that everybody has a Kindle, and Jim said that our libraries are not our grandfather's libraries. And I've been leading seniors book groups for 22 years, raised a bit of a stink when the bookmobiles were cut off because these seniors have paid for these libraries. They have paid for these services. And a huge number of them lost access to the library when they lost the bookmobiles. And now, money that used to go for regular standard titles, audiobooks on tape, are going toward Kindles, which they do not have. In 22 years, I've had 2 seniors, and this was a fairly affluent seniors group that have Kindles because they are not comfortable with the technology. Just like some of them don't have computers because they're not comfortable with the technology. You all are a social service provider, and these are a group of people that won't ask. Because I know Nora has been wonderful and said, you can call and we'll bring you whatever book you want.
So could you phrase that as a question?
Sure. What programs do the libraries have in place to include this huge segment of the population in the technology boom and the Kindle and the e-reader program?
Actually, I think Glendale is running a test or will be running a test to use e-readers with one of their senior reading groups. And one of the reasons why I know the learning curve there is a little steep, but you can make any book large print, which a lot of large print publishing is downsizing because of ebooks. So we can take any book that we have in our collection and make it large print instead of having to wait sometimes 6 months, sometimes forever for the large print version of that book to become available. So that's one of the reasons why I personally advocate, for seniors to jump into the e-reader pool. A lot of the people who come in to the Tinker stations, to the ebook classes are seniors. So they don't need my help. They're jumping in on their own.
Are we going to get to the point where libraries loan out Kindles just as they've loaned out books?
Some libraries actually do that.
Already.
And we are adapting technology. We're helping seniors learn how to use their devices, just like we help them learn to use computers, providing classes. My in-laws took computer classes to learn Word and Excel. So we adapt. We adapt to help them adapt. But we also still buy books. We buy a lot of books. 40,000
in a lot of different formats.
In a lot of different formats.
We buy books on CD, we buy large print, we do not buy books on cassette anymore.
But that is the challenge, is to maintain essentially a dual system, and the
Yes.
cost that it does require to maintain a dual system. We do have to move into the 21st century, but we also have to maintain our existing services. So that's an additional burden on us as a library, is balancing that.
And you think about how many times you're buying The Racketeer, which comes out in October from John Grisham. How many times you're going to buy it in regular print, you're going to buy it in large print, you're going to buy it in CD, you're going to buy it in ebook, you're going to buy it in downloadable ebook. So we do try to facilitate everyone.
And I think it's important to also understand that when we buy an ebook, we don't have unlimited use of that ebook. We can't circulate it to everybody. It has a limited number. We buy copies of the ebook, and we can circulate the number of copies that we buy. So that's an interesting thing, is that.
Well, there's many things. I mean, sometimes it costs 3 times as much as the hardcover,
Wow.
which probably, if The Racketeer is Random House, it will probably be about $85 for an ebook copy, where your print copy will cost $26. If it's, HarperCollins, you can only circulate it 26 times.
Wow.
So there's lots of,
That's the marketing model that they're going under.
Money,
They don't
money,
know how to
money.
pay a publisher unless they know exactly how many they're going to print, or how many they're going to print. They're printing ebooks. So.
Well, in all fairness, too, there is something to be said for paying the authors. And
Yes.
so the publishing houses do have that interest as well.
Exactly.
Kelly, how much more time? A couple more questions in the back. Yes, sir.
Thank you. One way that I think about libraries is not so much as a depository or a repository of books or printed material, as Dennis said, and as the panelists have noted, is broader than that. But I think of it as a cultural repository. And I'm not sure that the interweb will achieve that function or that role anytime soon. One quick example. When the new facility opened, I wandered up to the music floor, and there in the public area, not in the stacks, were these oversized books that contained the complete scores of many, many operas. And I don't read music, but I do like opera, and I just lost myself in those books for a while. It was almost an imaginative act. And I'm not sure that, I think that's a function that libraries will continue to have that I don't think the web will bring us for a long, long time.
Comment from the panel?
One of the comments that our new director made in her interview was that she viewed our branch libraries as living rooms of the neighborhood, a place where you come and gather together in the living room. And I agree with that, and it follows along with your experience there. We want the library to be your living room, a place where you feel comfortable visiting. And then as an extension of that, with the interweb, the internet, we're doing an exchange with our sister cities in Cologne and in China, with librarians from our institution are going to Indianapolis sister cities, and they're going to experience that, and then librarians from there are going to come back here. But we're setting up a web visit so that the people from the branch at college can see their colleague in China while she's visiting at this library in China. So we're trying to make that living room global and use technology to its best advantage.
I think that's a very good point that you raised. One of the things I've noticed about Indianapolis, we don't have a lot of common denominators culturally here. Certainly it's not Lucas Oil Stadium on a Sunday afternoon. It's not a church on a Sunday morning. Churches often are the more segregated parts of any community. It's not our transit system. When I worked in Cleveland some years ago, I'd take the train to work and I'd be rubbing shoulders with a hotel worker on one side and a corporate attorney on the other side. We don't have that here. Every time I go into a library here, and I live just a couple blocks from the central library, I'm amazed at the common denominator that the library is, because it brings together so many different people from so many different aspects, and it makes me feel so good to be in a community where I can be in a place where people are different than I am. And I can see where we're all in it together for one purpose, and that's to get information in whatever way we can. So I think it's a very, very good point, and I'm certainly glad that you raised it. Other questions from the group or comments? Ma'am?
More just a comment. I happen to be a librarian. I've been one for about 25 years now. And I remember when I told my friends when I was moving from Georgia that I was going to library school, one said, "Why are you doing that? Books aren't going to be here in 10 years," or some amount of number he gave. And I said, well, I don't believe that, number one. And number two, as little as I knew about library school at the time, other than I knew I had applied, I'd been accepted, and I was leaving, and I was going, was that they were a profession. It was a master's degree. It was at a university. I figured they knew what they were doing. They were going to teach us what we needed to know for what we would be encountering, and that libraries themselves were going to stay up on the times. So I think 25 years later, actually 28 years later, libraries are wholly different than when I started. And I started as a public librarian, now I'm a law librarian, and have been a law librarian for 16 years now at 2 different law firms here in the city. And my job has changed dramatically in those environments as it has in the public libraries. And I just think, and I can't think of who said it, but I think the rumors of the demise of the library are greatly exaggerated.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. We're going to need to wrap it up, Kelly, or do we have time for one more? Wrap it up? All right, well, we have a drawing that Kelly is going to conduct. So you are in charge of the drawing. Help me thank our panel for their wonderful contributions. Holly, Robin, John, and Jim, thanks so much. You bring different perspectives, and it's so refreshing. And as the sign says, a civil conversation. Isn't it wonderful to be in a place where we can have a civil conversation without any hollering at each other? So thank you so much. So I get to draw. Wait a minute. I guess it doesn't make any difference because they were mixed up. So you got it.
We have Anna Dawson. And, oh, yay!
A goodie bag for Anna.
Have her show us your library card.
This book is included by John Eller, Becoming Ray
Oh, terrific. Wonderful.
Okay. So, I love your necklace, by the way.
Okay.
That's wonderful.
All right, well, thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to make one final comment.
Do we have a microphone real quickly? Hold on, because this is being recorded, so we want to make sure that you get it. And if you could be quick, because we are running out of time.
I'm saying this as president of the ACLU of Indiana and someone who spent my entire life in libraries. You are crazy if you don't think libraries are going to be under tremendous attack. 20 years ago, a city-county councilman said, "You cannot tell me that people need libraries. Everyone has a television." That we've destroyed public education. You are next. Sorry.
Well, on that cheery note, thank you for attending. Thanks again to WFYI, our panel, and mostly to the Civil Liberties Union of Indiana for making this happen. Thank you very much. Have a great day.